You see the truth no one else can see. The micro-betrayals everyone ignores, the scripted conversations, the love publicly praised, privately withheld, the smiling faces hiding contempt, the polite silence hiding strategy. But that kind of clarity becomes a curse. You feel like something is fundamentally wrong with you, like you're living in a world that wasn't made for you. Because awareness isn't comfort. It's exile from the stories others trust, from the mask they collectively wear, from the peace they defend with denial. If you've ever felt exhausted by noticing things others ignore, if your clarity made you feel isolated instead of safe, this video is for you. It won't be easy to hear, but we're going to uncover why seeing deeply can feel like a burden, and how to reclaim the strength in what you've endured. But I must warn you, once you uncover what I'm about to show you, there's no going back. You'll never look at your interactions the same way again. You're not paranoid or oversensitive. You're awake. And that clarity, it's not what broke you, but it is what will rebuild you. Let's dive in. You didn't imagine it. The pause in their voice, the glance that didn't match their smile, the room that went silent the second you spoke. They didn't need to scream to sever you. They just needed to act like nothing happened. That's the violence of subtle betrayal. It doesn't shout, it shifts, in energy, in tone, in timing. And you felt all of it. But when you tried to name it, they called you dramatic, sensitive, paranoid. So you stopped naming. You watched instead. You studied their faces, toned yourself down, not because you were wrong, but because they needed you confused to stay comfortable. This isn't hypersensitivity. It's complex attunement, often rooted in childhood hyper-vigilance, a survival mechanism from environments where emotional safety was inconsistent. Your nervous system learned to notice micro-shifts because missing them could mean rejection or danger. Simone Weil wrote, "To be always relevant, you have to say things which are eternal." The betrayals you noticed weren't fleeting. They were quiet evidence of your exile. The moment love became performance, the second safety became a strategy. In trauma psychology, this cumulative invalidation contributes to complex PTSD, where clarity becomes hypervigilance and kindness becomes self-abandonment. A parent said, "You're fine," while you were crying. A friend changed the subject every time you opened up. A partner rolled their eyes when you said, "I feel unseen." And it didn't just sting, it rewired you. You became the one who noticed too much, in a world that rewarded not noticing at all. Let's take a moment to reflect. When did someone's silence speak louder than their words, and you were the only one who heard it? What emotion did you learn to mute because others didn't know how to hold it? Who called you too much when all you were doing was naming the truth? But here's what no one tells you. Your pain didn't start with the betrayal. It started when you were the only one who saw it. In the next section, we'll unpack why your ability to see was treated like a threat, and how awareness became your original exile. Let's go deeper. It's not just that you saw what others didn't, it's that you named it. And the second you did, the room changed. Their faces froze, their tone flattened. They either corrected your version of events, or worse, ignored it entirely. And in that moment, You weren't just alone. You were outside. Because clarity doesn't get you connection, it gets you exile. In families that survive through denial, in friendships that function on fiction, your honesty becomes the disruption they fear most. Philosopher Miranda Fricker calls this epistemic injustice, where people in pain aren't just disbelieved, they're dehumanized for speaking at all. The human nervous system is wired for connection. But when that connection requires self-abandonment, you're forced to choose between truth and belonging. And most people? They choose belonging, no matter how false. Psychologist Alice Miller called it the drama of the gifted child. Those with heightened emotional perception are often the first to feel the system's sickness, and the first to be scapegoated for it. Carl Jung warned that individuation, the process of becoming your full self, demands breaking away from the collective illusions that raise you. That includes family mythologies, friendship scripts, cultural compliance. And that break? It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like abandonment. Jean-Paul Sartre described bad faith as the choice to deny reality in order to protect comfort. You didn't make that choice. You saw what was real and refused to betray it. But that refusal, it cost you their acceptance. You spoke up at dinner about the tension in the room, and they laughed like you were imagining it. You confronted a friend about repeated passive aggression, and they told you you're overthinking everything. You questioned a parent's harmful comment, and they told you you're too sensitive. They didn't just deny your words. They denied you, your perception, your emotional truth, your right to feel what you felt. Let's pause here to reflect. When did you say something true, and the silence that followed was louder than any rejection? Who told you your memory was wrong, just to protect their version of the story? What have you stopped sharing, not because it wasn't real, but because no one around you wanted it to be? But here's the paradox. You weren't wrong for noticing. You weren't too sensitive. You were awake in a system designed to stay asleep. If you're ready, let's push further into the cost of seeing clearly. We're about to uncover how this clarity doesn't just hurt internally, it becomes a threat to others, and they will make you pay for noticing. You didn't choose to be hyper-aware. It was chosen for you, forced into focus by caretakers who lied with a smile, by systems that gaslit with a grin. You didn't become perceptive out of curiosity. You became perceptive out of survival. Because when the people around you won't name the danger, you learn to study the weather patterns of their mood. When love is conditional, your nervous system becomes a prediction engine. And clarity? It's not a trait. It's a trauma response. Complex PTSD is often born in environments that distort reality, where what you feel is real, but what you're told is false. Over time, your mind splits. You become hyper-vigilant. You scan for tone shifts, eye twitches, pauses in breath. You read people like a survival manual, because once it was. You don't just notice everything. You feel responsible for it. And that responsibility collapses into exhaustion, emotional fatigue, compassion burnout, numbness disguised as neutrality. Viktor Frankl once warned, "Awareness is suffering if one cannot change the system." And you couldn't. You were a child, a partner, a friend, trapped in a house, a dynamic, a relationship where denial was law. Your truth had no currency, only consequences. You saw what they wouldn't, felt what they deflected, and carried what no one else would name. You saw the betrayal coming before it arrived, but when it hit, nobody else even noticed. Gabor Mate writes, "The cost of awareness in a dysfunctional system is often your belonging. And when clarity costs connection, your body calls it danger." You noticed your mother's face tighten at the mention of your dream, and you knew, without her saying it, that joy wasn't allowed here. You heard your partner's compliment carry a subtle correction, and you felt the cost of not dimming your light. You called out a pattern in a friend group, and suddenly you were the dramatic one, the unstable one. The problem, you weren't. You were just the one who saw too clearly, and that clarity made you a threat. Pause here. Think deeply about your own situation. What does your body do, tense, freeze, collapse, when you notice what no one else will name? When did your clarity stop feeling empowering and start feeling like a burden? What emotional truth have you carried in silence because no one around you could bear to hear it? But here's what no one tells you. Even if clarity costs you connection, losing yourself to keep their comfort costs you everything. What we're about to discuss isn't easy, but it's necessary. We'll uncover the survival patterns you built to keep the peace, and how seeing the truth became a role you played until it nearly erased you. Stay with me. There's a reason awareness doesn't feel like power. It feels like loss. Loss of innocence. Loss of safety. Loss of the comfort you once found in the stories you were handed. To see clearly is to rupture with illusion. To watch the mask slip from your culture, your relationships, your family, and know it can't be unseen. You didn't just wake up. You buried the version of yourself that found comfort in pretending. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Awakening sounds beautiful, but it's not. It's disorienting, isolating, violent even, because it asks you to become something no one around you is prepared to accept. Yourself. Jung's concept of individuation, becoming whole, no longer fragmented to please the tribe, demands exile. And that exile? It isn't always physical. It's spiritual. You become a stranger to the roles you used to play, to the dreams you were told to want, to the love that only existed if you stayed small. Nietzsche wrote, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." But what he didn't say is that you don't want to destroy them either. You just couldn't live inside them anymore. When you outgrow illusion, you outgrow comfort. You stop being normal in a system that rewards numbness. You stop laughing on cue. You stop agreeing when your body says no. You stop betraying yourself to belong. And when you stop doing those things, people start looking at you like you're the problem. You're not. You're just no longer asleep. You stopped ignoring family conversations that distorted the past, and suddenly you were angry. You questioned your boss's values, and suddenly you were ungrateful. You ended the friendship that only loved the obedient version of you, and suddenly you were selfish. But deep down, you knew. You didn't betray them. You betrayed the mask. Let this part land before we move forward. What illusion did you finally let die? And what did it cost you to bury it? When has clarity felt more like exile than enlightenment? If no one validates your truth, what part of you still craves that permission? But clarity doesn't stay internal, it spills out, and once it touches others, it becomes a mirror they can't tolerate. Next, we'll explore how people retaliate when your insight threatens their illusion. Here's where the real damage begins. They didn't just disagree, they made your perception the problem. Because in manipulative systems, whether it's a narcissistic parent, a controlling partner, or a covertly competitive friend, clarity isn't neutral. It's a threat. They don't want truth. They want comfort. And your insight, it makes comfort impossible. So they start the inversion. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. You're reading too much into things. But what you were really doing was noticing. And that's what they can't tolerate. Because the moment you name the pattern, the performance is over. The mask slips, the illusion cracks, so they pivot fast. They gaslight you, tell you what you saw didn't happen. They pathologize your intuition, suggest therapy, blame your trauma, accuse you of projecting. They triangulate, tell others you're unstable, dramatic, paranoid, to isolate you before the truth spreads. Your vision becomes a liability. Your memory becomes a weapon they try to disarm. And your need for honesty? That's labeled rage. They don't argue with your insight. They attack your credibility. Because if you're too emotional, they don't have to be accountable. This is epistemic abuse, the deliberate undermining of your capacity to know, interpret, and trust your own reality. It's projection, where they offload their guilt, their aggression, their denial, and place it on you. It's triangulation, where they manipulate others to reinforce the narrative that you are unstable or dangerous, just for seeing too clearly. And it works, because the louder they discredit you, the more isolated you feel, until one day you start to believe them. In Sartre's Bad Faith, people cling to the lie because it protects their script. And you, truth teller, were unscripted, so they had to frame you as the threat. You saw the lie behind the compliment. You felt the shift in their tone. You asked the question no one else would ask. And instead of being heard, you were punished, labeled difficult, made the enemy for refusing to pretend. Now answer this, honestly. How did someone punish you for naming what they denied? Who labeled your clarity as chaos just to protect their comfort? What part of your perception did you begin to hide, just to stay connected? Because when someone can't destroy your truth, they'll try to destroy your credibility. But the most brutal twist of all? It isn't that they turned on you. It's that you began turning on yourself. This is the next layer, and it's the one no one talks about. Stay with me. We'll dissect the internalized cost of clarity. How hyper-awareness becomes self-doubt, and why the most dangerous exile happens inside. Clarity didn't ruin your life, but it did reveal who never deserved to be in it. And now, after the collapse, the exile, the endless internal doubting, you're left with something far more dangerous than naivete, sovereignty. Because survival isn't just walking away. It's walking differently, holding your perception without apology, seeing the cracks and choosing not to fall through them again. Your clarity? It was never the curse. It was the compass. But to wield it, you need strategy. Because in a world that punishes awareness, holding on to yourself becomes a form of rebellion. To survive with clarity in a world that fears it, you need containment. It begins with boundaries, the kind that don't blur under pressure, the kind that separate your truth from their comfort, and stay sharp when they try to dull them. You don't explain your perception to those committed to misunderstanding it. That's not a conversation. That's a trap. You need anchors, philosophical ones. Simone Weil said, "Clarity is the courage to not look away." And sometimes that courage will cost you relationships, but it will never cost you your self-respect, because in systems built on denial, even kindness becomes a weapon. So when Brené Brown says, "Clarity is kindness," you have to remember, in the wrong hands, your kindness will be twisted into compliance. That's why reclaiming your clarity is not just healing, it's rebellion. And no rebellion survives in isolation. You don't need an audience, but you need someone like our community that we're building here. Someone who doesn't flinch when you tell the truth. Someone who's lived in the deep and doesn't call it too much. That's not just validation, it's witness. And then you rewrite the script. They told you your insight made you difficult. But let's be honest, your insight made you dangerous. Dangerous to people who built their safety on denial. Dangerous to illusions that depended on your silence. And now, you're not silent anymore. Small talk isn't just boring, it starves your soul. Mental noise from hollow conversation feels like psychic malnutrition. But you carry a soul frequency bigger than small talk. Your intensity isn't a flaw, it's an assignment beyond comfort. The world that fears your clarity is the world that needs your depth most. The first time someone looked you in the eyes and said, "I believe you," they didn't interrupt, didn't soften it, didn't pathologize it. They just held the truth with you. And for the first time, you didn't feel insane. You felt seen. If you've ever met someone and felt, "They get me," that's more than coincidence. It's frequency matching. Rare recognizes rare. And when that connection happens, you know, you're not alone. Let's hold still for a moment and listen inward. If your clarity was respected, even when it hurt, how would your inner landscape change? What boundary feels impossible right now, but essential to honor what you know? Who or what in your life can hold your vision without needing to shrink it? You didn't ask for this awareness, but now that you have it, you can finally live from it. In our final section, we'll reframe your insight. Not as something that isolates you, but something that emancipates you. Because you weren't broken by clarity, you were born by it. The most important piece? That's still ahead. They told you your perception was paranoia. Your insight was intensity. Your depth was drama. You don't just see. You resonate at a frequency most never hear. And because few can match it, you've felt alone. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. But what if they were wrong? What if your awareness wasn't the problem? It was the proof. The proof that you noticed what they buried, that you remembered what they rewrote, that you saw not just what people did, but what they meant. You didn't ask for that clarity. You developed it to survive. Jung called individuation a breaking away from the collective illusion. It hurts because you lose the comfort of the crowd, but in its place, you find something else. Yourself, not the one sculpted by denial or obedience, but the one born in exile, sharpened by solitude and anchored by truth. Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. You've been in that space. You didn't just see the cycle, you stopped it. This is what clarity gives you. Not just wounds, but wisdom. You were never broken. You were overloaded with truth no one else would carry. They wanted you to believe your sensitivity was a flaw, that your questions were problems, that your depth was delusion. But awareness is not pathology. It's the residue of reality you weren't allowed to name. You didn't become too much. You became attuned. Because when your life was shaped by what others denied, perception became protection. Everything falls into place the moment you stop asking if you are crazy and start asking why they need you to believe you are. Let's pause here to reflect. One last time. If you no longer feared isolation for seeing clearly, who would you become? What creativity or compassion might flow from reclaiming the clarity you suppressed? What truth inside you deserves homage, even if nobody else understands it? If this video helped validate your clarity, not dismiss it, comment below. I see what others ignore. You're not broken for noticing. You're not weak for feeling. You were forged by the truth. And that clarity? It's not a curse. It's your compass, and it's time to use it.